message.
Oh, yeah.
So we
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for
everyone into the meeting.
participating. Sorry?
Sorry, we still got a number of people in the waiting room.
Yeah, I'm just admitting them now.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for participating in this very important virtual community center open house. I would like to recognize that this performance is coming from me from beautiful Bowen Island, Naklalakwam. And we recognize the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. And we are very, very, very proud to be here. I am excited to share with you the culmination of many years of hard work, to have further discussion on this important project, and to answer your questions as best as we can. I am pleased to introduce Chris Corrigan, our facilitator for this session. Chris will provide an overview of today's sessions and the housekeeping items. Take it away, Chris.
Great, thank you very much. So good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Corrigan. I live on Seven Hills near Miller Landing on Miller Road. And today we're going to be in an open house learning about the community center in preparation for the referendum on borrowing. The referendum dates, we'll just start and we'll end with this as well. But for your information, there will be a referendum vote, advance vote, that will happen on Wednesday, September 2nd, 2020. That's from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Bowen Island Municipal Hall. And on general voting day, that will be Saturday, September 12th, 2020 from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and that'll be at the school. There'll be a COVID safety plan in place. So important that you bring your masks and just be prepared to wait, keep your distance and be patient as people are voting so that we can observe safety protocols and social distancing and make sure that the vote goes off safely. Those are the times and dates for the vote, the referendum on borrowing. A few housekeeping rules for us this evening. This is a Zoom meeting. Many of you have probably been on Zoom now. We're recording it, and it's also being broadcast live on YouTube at the moment, and it will be recorded and archived on the municipality's YouTube channel, so it'll be available for watching afterwards. I'd like to ask everybody to keep your microphone muted, but you can turn your camera on if you'd like. It's always nice to see a few faces out there. We were talking earlier about what it would be like if we had community meetings with everybody wearing paper bags on their heads. So if bandwidth is not an issue for you, opening up your video is nice so that we can see who's here. We may at times mute your microphones and keep you quiet, and that just helps the presenters to be able to be front and center in front of us. So if you find yourself muted or unmuted and you didn't do that, know that it'll be either Sophie and I who are controlling that too. There will be a time for questions after the presentation, and what we ask you to do is please hold your questions until the Q&A session. You can certainly type your questions in the chat box if you want. We'll try and get to them in order. The other protocol we're going to use this evening is for you to raise your virtual hand if you have a question to ask, and we're going to make a speakers list out of those virtual hands. The way to do that is to look at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's an option that says participants. If you click on that little button, it'll send you, or it'll open up a list of participants, and there'll be an option there to raise hand. You could try practicing now if you want. You could raise your hand and you can lower your hand. If you raise your hand and leave it up, I'll call on you for a question, and we ask that you, and I'll repeat this as we go, but we'll ask that you direct your question specifically to a panelist, and we want to try and get all the questions in, as many questions in as possible this evening. You can also type your question in the chat box and we'll try and get to it in order as well. So just doing our best to make sure everybody's clear and has a chance to participate. So with that, I think it's going to introduce you to our panel of people tonight. There's folks from a number of different groups that have been involved in this project. And so I'm just going to get them to introduce themselves in order, and we'll start with Drew Rose from the design team. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, Drew, so we can hear you and start over.
Sure. Okay, sorry. So I'm Drew Rose, and I'm an architect. I live here on Bowen, and I've been working with my colleague Craig Burns and his team at Principal Architecture on the design of the new community center.
Great, thank you. And then we'll go to the project management team. So that's Sam Collins, Gary Ander, and Liam Edwards. Sam?
Hi, my name's Sam Collins, project manager on the project since 2016, and really excited to be here with everyone.
Gary, do you want to unmute yourself and say hello?
Yeah, it's Mayor Gary Ender. I've also been chair of the Community Center Select Steering Committee since its inception.
Great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liam Edwards. I'm the new CAO for Bowen Island Municipality. Pretty new to the project, but pretty excited to be here.
Great. Thank you for joining us, of course. And then we have from the Arts and Culture Group, we have Jacqueline Massey, Jamie Schaefer, and Sherry Ulrich. Jacqueline.
Hi, I'm the former Executive Director of the Hearth and former member of the Community Center Select Standing Committee, where I shared the role of co-manager of the project with Shauna Jennings, who's the Manager of Recreation and Community Services for BIM.
Awesome. Jamie, do you want to unmute yourself? Say hi.
Hi, I'm Jamie Sheffer, and I have taken over Jacqueline's spot as the Executive Director for the Hearth Arts on Bowen. I'm new on the island, so I'm still trying to get caught up with the project, but I'm super excited to see this going forward.
Awesome, thank you. And then Sherry. And unmute yourself.
Unmute my audio.
There you go.
There are many ways to do it.
Many ways.
I'm Sherry Ulrich. I've been on the island for 27 years. I'm a recording artist and songwriter, and I served as chair of one of many committees over time, the Bowen Community Center Action Committee 2010 to 2013. I think those were the years.
It's been a long journey. Let's also from Recreation, we have Craig McDonald with us this evening. Craig, can you unmute yourself to say hi?
Unmute there. Okay, yeah, I'm Craig McDonald. I chair the Recreation Committee. And I can sort of look at the programming aspects of what's going to happen at the new community center. So lots of excitement happening there. So very happy to be part of it.
Great. Thanks so much. So welcome to all of you and welcome to our members of the public. I think we've got something like, it's a small group this evening, you know, just upwards of 20 folks that are here, 25 folks or so that have joined us, and thank you for joining us this evening. We, over the course of the open house this evening, we can go to the next slide, Sophie. We're going to be, the point of the session is so that you can learn more about the design and the operation and the cost of the community center. So the design team will make a presentation. We'll have a presentation on project management. So we'll have two pieces of content back to back. And then we'll have a question and answer session. And then we'll just finish up again with information on the referendum and how to vote in the upcoming boring referendum. So we're going to begin with a design team presentation. And so I'll hand it over to Drew to take us through the design of the community center.
Great, thank you, Chris. Just share my screen here. Okay. So, yeah, what I'd like to do is just provide a bit of a brief overview of the building design, and then to walk everyone through the spaces within the building and give you a little bit of a sense of how we imagine those spaces might be used. So we just begin here with an aerial photograph showing Snug Cove. You can see the Four Corners intersection here, and then up the hill and just at the crest of the rise here coming up Bowen Trunk Road is the site with the proposed community center, and right adjacent to the Bix soccer field. And so here's Bix here. The next slide, we're coming a little closer to the building now. You can see the Bix soccer field here. We're sort of in the southwest, and we're hovering up with a kind of an eagle's eye view looking down at the building. So coming up the road, coming down the road, vehicle access off Trunk Road onto the property. There's a drop off. This is the entrance plaza to the building. And then parking is provided along the west side and then also along the north side of the building. It's not really evident from this slide, but the property actually has some pretty steep slopes on it coming down to Trunk Road, but even more so on the east side, there's basically a rock cliff dropping down to Seniors Lane. Given those conditions, we moved the building as close to the soccer field as we could. And the other intention there was to try to preserve as much as we can the wooded area behind, including the memorial bench, and so that we're kind of setting the building into a fairly natural, we hope, kind of natural landscape. You also see here that there's the building is organized basically with 4 volumes. There's 2 almost parallel sort of gabled volumes, and then 2 higher box-like volumes behind those. So this is about a 16,000 square foot building all on 1 floor. Again, and we're just a little bit closer in now looking at the building and at those volumes I was describing. Now this slide takes you inside the volumes a little bit. They become transparent. So we have the entrance plaza here, the tan area, coming up to the front door of the building. On the west wing is the municipal offices. Here, the largest and tallest volume in kind of lavender is the performing arts and community space. Behind that and in the center of the building, what we're calling the community living room, kind of a major socializing space within the building. Behind that, a multi-purpose room, and then at the very back, the community recreation functions, as well as the washrooms and shower area. So let's just walk through those spaces, get a little bit closer look at things. So coming up through the entrance plaza, underneath a roof canopy, a kind of a covered porch, we arrive at the main entrance to the building, the front door. Through there, you come directly to the building reception. You'll note there's a second entry off the parking at the north end of the building. So there's a connection between the south and the north entries as you come in. And directly opposite that reception area is the community living room space. This is as I mentioned, it's a socializing space. There's a coffee kiosk. There's a domestic scale kitchen, which serves both the multi-purpose room behind it, as well as this living room space. This is the first of a few sort of little vignettes that we've added into the presentation here to give you the flavor of things and how these spaces might be used. So again, coming up through the entrance plaza, you've walked up the stairs or you come up the ramp under the roof canopy, and you arrive at the entrance. You can see it's an entry vestibule, welcoming entry, obviously accessible. Immediately inside those doors, you're greeted by the reception desk for the building. From there, you can look directly through into the living room space. You'll see it's here, it's all animated, how that coffee kiosk would operate and socializing opportunities. There's a lot of transparency through this central space, initially to the exterior, to the courtyard on the east, but also back down the way we come, if you will. Beside that is a gallery lounge space, a narrow space with seating and an opportunity for presentation artwork. And there are windows here that look into the performance space. And beside that, there's a wall which would have signage indicating what the programs that are being delivered today, but also over the week and perhaps over the coming month. Going the other way, there's a glass wall that wraps around this end of the multi-purpose room, and you can see into the activities that are occurring in there. So lots of social connections available. Moving a little bit further back, looking at the multi-purpose room, the community recreation facilities here. It's subdivided into 2 spaces, a fitness studio and a weight room. And then adjacent to those, the building washrooms and the showers. So here we've got another little vignette. This one is looking at those spaces, beginning here at the north parking area. Now you see that second entry. There's bicycle parking, scooter parking under a roof cover here. And then coming through that door, this is your most direct route from the exterior into the community recreation spaces. So you pass the 4 showers here and the washrooms. As you can see, again, subdivided into a weight room and a fitness room. And then those spaces open out onto the courtyard. So in good weather, there's an opportunity for the programs to migrate to the exterior and things to happen outside. One of the things I want to point out here is the extensive amount of glass and natural light in these areas, in strong sort of contrast to where these programs are being delivered currently. So right adjacent to that is this multi-purpose room. This room is loosely programmed for both arts and rec functions, and will be used primarily as well. It will be used for child minding with parents who come to the facility to partake in some of the classes in the rec area. Both areas have dedicated storage and the built-in millwork, and for equipment that's related to the programs that will be that will be using those spaces. Here you see most clearly that sense of the kitchen, which actually serves both sides, both of those rooms. Moving next to the municipal offices, here you see them in that transparent blue and in the west wing. And a couple of vignettes here. This first one shows the operation during the daytime. Now, the building itself will be open from approximately 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. It seems likely that the municipal offices will not be. So given that, we came to the conclusion that we actually needed to introduce a second entrance from within the building into the municipal offices. So that entrance is here adjacent to the building reception and into a separate reception area for the municipal offices. Behind that, obviously some open office space as well as enclosed offices for municipal staff. There's a second point of access to municipal staff, and that's from the north entry down here. If you were coming to see someone in building or planning, you would come to this reception area rather than the other one. Bookending this whole space, there's a large community meeting room at one end, which will be used by staff undoubtedly, but it will also be bookable, and it would be the primary space used for council meetings. This smaller meeting room at the north end, similar situation, could be booked by the public for meetings, for classes, and other kinds of events. So here's the same scenario, but at night. Of course, the building reception is still open and functioning. There's a class going on or some kind of presentation in the large multi-purpose or the large meeting room on the south, and some kind of a meeting happening in the other one. You notice also there's a kind of an extension of the gallery space where the wall that separates the municipal offices from the rest of the building is seen as another place for the display of artwork. So let's move next to what's the largest single space in the building, which is the performing arts and community space. And here we have a couple of vignettes. This first vignette is showing how things might be set up in the evening for a performance. So we have retractable seating in the space, and here they're extended. The seating is extended. They're seating for 180 audience members. So that's about 2.5 times more than Tiernanog Theater. When set up for some kind of a performance, or blackout curtains on the exterior walls, as well, exterior windows, as well as the windows at the back of the space. There are draperies set up. There's change rooms at the back of the facility here, and a crossover at the back of the stage area. Part of our team consisted as well of a theater consultant who helped us with the design of this space, as well as the lighting grid, which isn't shown in this scenario. And we have an acoustical consultant who was part of the team too. And we feel that we've got the acoustics tamed in this room to the extent that they are going to be optimal for a variety of different kinds of performance, as well as other kinds of uses. So the room can be used for the theater, for dance, for music, and other scenarios. It can be used by the public for weddings, for receptions, that kind of thing, as well as for some council functions like town hall meetings. The entrance into this space comes off the living room, and it's a light and sound lock. So it's a vestibule that you come through. The living room space in this kind of scenario, we see as a kind of a mingling space at intermission, probably wine sales, that kind of thing. And in good weather, that opens again out onto the courtyard. Massive transformation in the daytime. The seating is retracted. The blackout curtains are removed from the windows. Natural light is coming into the space, and the space is available for, again, a variety of different kinds of activities. Here we're showing a kind of parent-taught get-together, And there's some dedicated storage here for the rec programs. And you see what's happened with the draperies. They've been retracted into their purpose-built and tall closet here. So I talked briefly as I was moving through here about this exterior courtyard space. It's formed on the east side of the building by 3 wings of the building. And we really see this as an outdoor room, a place where activities that are occurring indoors can also happen out there, and other additional activities can happen as well. From here, there's a pathway which has been enhanced through the work of our design of our landscape architects, and going to the memorial bench, which is off in the woods in that area. So, and then I mentioned the steep slopes, and as a result of those, this southeast corner of the building underneath the performing arts wing has what has emerged as a basement space, and that basement space is going to be used for the services for the building. Mechanical, electrical services are here, as well as storage for the building. So there's all the components all together as one in one building. We're, I guess I'd like to say in summary, what we feel like we've got here is we brought together under one roof all or at least most of the programs which are currently being provided, but they're scattered around the community in different buildings on Bowen. And here they can all be under one roof and be much more convenient for the people who participate in those programs. These are flexible and multifunctional spaces, and they're available for everyone. Really, this is a place where you can come to meet new friends and to meet old friends. And on that note, I think it's time to put this back. Chris, can you stop the screen sharing for me?
I can stop the screen sharing for you. There you go. Thanks very much, Drew.
Thank you.
That's great. So before we have any questions, we're going to move on to hearing from the project management team. And so we're going to turn it over to Mayor Gary Ander, who will give us a little bit of the background. We're going to look through the history of the project, the current business plan for the project, which came out last week, and then talk a bit about the funding and some of the big questions that we've already heard about in the community. So kick it over to Gary.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chris. And I think I'm on there. Just want to, yeah, thank you very much for that. As Chris said, we'll be looking at the history of the project and how we've come so far. Then we'll go over the business plan and financing, followed by some answers to those big questions that we've been hearing about. So let's talk briefly about the history. The community center project goes back into a previous millennium, about 35 years ago, when the community felt the need for a town hall to gather, celebrate, and communicate to strengthen all aspects of our rural quality of life. Let's fast forward to a more recent history. As you can see from the slide, many initiatives are brought forward to satisfy this ever-increasing need. All these initiatives were very intensive and involved various levels of community involvement. And just to run through them, they were all quite significant. The Civic Facilities Task Force 2005, Civic Facility Location Report in 2006, Architectural Feasibility Studies 2008, the Civic Facilities Working Group in 2008, the Community Center Action Committee 2012, and the Temporary Advisory Board in 2014. We kept hearing a common feedback that there was a number of venues on the island for social, artistic, and sport scattered all over the island, unfortunately, and they couldn't accommodate larger groups. For many islanders, community center was the most logical solution to these limitations. During this 10-year period, we reached out to stakeholders and community members to identify the needs of the islanders. Various cultural and recreational master plans reinforced the need for such a facility. Vital Conversations 2014, a comprehensive needs analysis initiated by the Bowen Island Community Foundation with very broad and diverse community input, found a community gathering place to be essential to a healthy community. That was more recently reinforced in Vital Conversations 2017. Given the history and the ongoing desire to secure such a facility, The council of the day committed to making the building of a community center the top priority of the term and fully supported the ongoing development of the long-awaited facility. In fall of 2016, the Community Center Select Steering Committee was established to move our island place from dream to reality. As you can see from the timeline, this was a 4-year process. And we've conducted study after study, surveys, and working group and task force to come up with a flexible, multi-use facility that integrated the knowledge and concepts from the previous plans, always being conscious to make the best use of every dollar spent. Countless hours of volunteer, council, and staff time have gone into planning and engaging the community and applying for grants to build this beautiful community center. Bowen Island is one of the few communities in Canada that does not have a community center. We have land dedicated for this project. We have almost all the funding to build it, including a remarkable grant from Investing in Canada infrastructure program. We have a strong team of professionals to lead the project, and we are ready. Now is an excellent time to move forward. Thank you for that. And I'm going to pass it on to Liam, and he's going to talk about the business case.
Okay, hello everyone. I get to share the really exciting bits of this project. Well, at least it's exciting to me. It's not as pretty and as flashy as what Drew shared, but I'll be touching more on the nuts and bolts of things. So first off, I did want to just talk briefly about the business plan that recently came out. But it has been a ton of work that's gone into it. It's been developed over quite a bit of time with many different expert eyes on it. And it's very comprehensive plan for the community center. It takes into account everything from the background of the project, environmental considerations, does good risk analysis, as well as provides an implementation strategy that looks at the full operating costs, both the revenues and expenditures. And so I actually encourage all of you actually to go to the website ourislandpage.com, and you can find the business plan there in its full glory and have a read, as well as a whole bunch of other useful project information. So please visit that site. Sophie, if you could advance the next slide, please. Thanks. So now I want to talk a little bit about the funding of the project, and first and foremost, the grant that Gary, our mayor, alluded to. And so we're very fortunate to receive $7.9 million from the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. And it fills the largest piece of our funding formula for this project. And it's also important to note that it was the second largest funding contribution to any community in the province under the Investing in Canada program, under the Community Culture and Rec program, as well as the Rural and Northern program. So it's a good contribution that we're very fortunate to have. It's really a once in a lifetime opportunity to put this funding into place and to use it as it was approved for. The grant is specific to specified outcomes that were identified in the application. And so I just want to be really clear on that. It's not $7.9 million for us to do as we please. It's $7.9 million to fulfill the outcomes identified by this project. And so if the referendum to borrow the remaining money to make this project come to reality does not pass, we can't simply just reallocate the funds to something different. It need to reconsider the project in its entirety, and that we'll have to speak with the federal government and the provincial government on if we can continue to use those funds. One other critical part about funding, which I know a fair bit about because that came from the provincial government and ran many funding programs for them, including this one, is that using the grant funding wisely does also set us up for success for future funding. It's not to say that if this referendum doesn't go forward and the project doesn't go forward, that we won't be able to receive future grants, but it is seen by funders beyond just the province that applicants and communities that use their funding effectively and are successful in delivering on the projects that they've been approved for are generally more successful for future opportunities. So that's just something that I wanted to pass along. We move to the next slide, Sophie. So the estimated capital cost of the project is a total of 14.5 million. As I said, 7.5 million is provided to us through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. We have already 1.2 million held in municipal reserves, plus we have 1.3 million that has already generously been contributed through community fundraising. So really what we're looking for is the remaining 4 million, which we will achieve through borrowing if the referendum is successful. 2 million of that borrowing is what we effectively call tax neutral. But the tax neutral term is I just want to be clear about that it is really what it means is there's no tax increase because it's effectively the same. To manage that debt is effectively the same that we're paying for our rent right now on municipal facilities. So it's a bit of a wash. So instead of paying rent, we'll be financing that debt. And at the end of the project, when the debt is paid off, it's an asset that we actually own. So it's a sound investment. $2 million of the 4 that we would be borrowing is actual new debt that isn't covered off in the current tax roll. And so that will result in a need for additional tax lift of about $50 a year. And I also want to be clear about the funding that we're getting, the 7.9 million, is essentially 73 cents of funding from the province and the federal government on every eligible dollar that we spend. So for every dollar that we spend, we can get 73 cents back from the province and the federal government, which is actually quite a bit better than the standard funding programs, which were generally 66 cents on the dollar. So again, it's an even better funding contribution than historically we've seen. So Sophie, if we could move to the next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the operating costs of this facility. And so Bowen Island has a pretty solid track record of operating fiscally responsibly and in an efficient way, and we continue to do so, and we will definitely do so with this community center. Operating expenses for municipal facilities are paid for by property taxes and accounted for in the 5-year fiscal plan, also known as the municipal budget. Currently, it costs $270,000 a year to operate our rented facilities. That includes the Municipal Hall and some of the recreation facilities that we use. The annual operating expenses for the community center are anticipated to increase by about $111,000 in the first year and in years going on after that. Recreation programming revenues and grants and interest from a community center endowment fund that's already been created will cover at least 45% of the operating costs. And we anticipate that those revenues will increase and that'll cover off more and more of the operating costs. And that we continue to accept donations for that endowment fund, which will help offset future operating costs. The impact to the average home, the average taxpayer, property taxpayer on the island is about $47 a year for the new operating costs. So if we move to the next slide, it shows us this is the capital costs of the project on the left-hand side and the operating costs on the right-hand side. So as I said before, it's about $50 per average property on Bowen, to finance the new debt to build the facility, and it's about $47 to the average property to operate the facility. So combined, we're looking at about $97 increase. And that's a pretty conservative estimate. We generally like to be conservative in the forecast that we do. And so it's based on interest rates that are actually already out of date. The Municipal Finance Authority interest rates that we would do our borrowing through have actually dropped significantly. And so if we do get a project approval, we can move forward to locking in some extremely competitive rates. But again, we want to be very conservative in our forecasting so that we're not surprised by things. So I think if we move to the next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tough questions we've been hearing from people giving us a call or stopping us in the street or through social media. And one primary question we hear is, why Municipal Hall? Why is the Municipal Hall included in this project? And really, it's about economies of scale. It's about saving money for how we operate our facilities. By bringing the building, or bringing the Municipal Hall into that same sort of building envelope, we're just naturally going to save on the operating costs in general, both from a utility perspective and also possibly from a staffing perspective. Locating the municipal offices there will actually save us on some office space that we would need in the facility for rec and arts and culture staff space and facilities management office space. So they'll be able to be incorporated into the Municipal Hall piece. It's also closer to Snug Cove, and it makes it a whole lot easier to get to the Municipal Hall. It's actually right on the bus route, so it's more accessible to those that might be using public transit. And it also creates an opportunity for more community use of spaces. On either end of the Municipal Hall, in the yellow space, these are office rooms that will be used by day by the municipality, but in the evenings and weekends become available for community use and rentals. And so that's a really unique aspect to this project that I think helped receive the funding from the province, because we really did highlight the multi-use functionality of this space. And that's something that was pretty attractive to them. There's a lot of additional benefits to co-locating these two facilities together. Consolidating services into a centralized location really does enable increased programming opportunities. And it also creates this informal space where people are going to just naturally bump into each other. And so there's going to be opportunities that arise from these informal bumping into each other that wouldn't otherwise be there. I like to think of this whole project, not just the Municipal Hall portion, but the community center portion in particular, as a piece of social infrastructure that is found in almost every community in the world. And Bowen has a tremendous community and strength in its community. I've only been here for a few months, but it's pretty readily available to see how strong the community is. I think this kind of social infrastructure will just help strengthen that fabric that binds the community together. And so I think it's a pretty sound investment, both financially and from a practicality point of view and from a social benefit point of view. So let's move to one of the next questions. This is one we get a lot of, parking. And I think irregardless of, irregardless is one of those words that always bugs me. It's actually regardless. Sorry, my own little pet peeve there. Anyway, the parking issue is one that seems to get a lot of people going. I want to be clear, the facility has 36 parking stalls adjacent to the building. It actually exceeds the requirements set out in our land use bylaws and the building zoning and the building permit requirements. It has an accessible parking. It has parking for bikes and scooters, and it'll have an electric vehicle charging station as well. There's also additional parking shown in all of these orange highlighted areas for people to park at if there is a need for overflow parking. We're also going to be very cognizant of how we program the space. And so we're going to work collaboratively as we currently do with BICS and others to try to make sure that we're not organizing a big event in both facilities, the school and the community hall at the same time, so that we can each utilize each other's parking areas. And then, you know, as much as possible, we'll encourage people to take alternative modes of transit. And more often than not, if there is a large event, people tend to travel to large events in at least pairs, if not more than two. And so when we think about like, okay, if we have a facility that can hold 180 people, if you were to say we got an 80% actual sellout or capacity of the facility, you're down to about 144, 150 people. And if everybody carpools a little bit, you're down to about 50 cars that need to arrive there. And I think we can easily accommodate that with some of the overflow parking. Perhaps people will have dinner in the Cove before their event and walk on up. So I think we'll move to the next slide here. Is there room for expansion? So the answer is a bit of a yes and a bit of a no. So the no part is that right now you can see the land that's been dedicated to the community center. We're using all of the really buildable available land right now. That's not to say that we couldn't expand in that buildable space if we really needed to. We may decide or see that parking isn't as valuable or as necessary as we assumed, and there may be an opportunity to expand a little to the north into that parking area. Or if it's deemed important to the community that we expand even beyond the footprint that we have allocated, well, then we would just need to go to council and ensure that it becomes a priority for that expansion, and we can move a bit further into the community lands. You know, maybe there's a desire for some other types of facilities like a skate park or something like that, and so maybe we're punching out further into these lands. So that's the yes part. It's up to the community and for mayor and council to consider and to approve if necessary an expansion. So let's move to the next question. Why no pool? I think most people understand why there isn't a pool, but the question goes beyond why there isn't a pool. Why there aren't other components too? But essentially, a pool, just to be clear, so that it's we're all on the same page, a pool is just not affordable for a community of our size. Even if we could afford to build a pool, the cost of operating a pool is extraordinarily expensive. And then you also need to be able to employ staff to actually operate the pool. I know some communities in the Sea to Sky corridor that have to actually close their pool down to minimal operating times, even though they're a very wealthy community, because they can't actually hire lifeguards to run their pool. So it's not just about the capital costs, it's also very largely about the operating costs. But building this community center on time and on budget with the funding that we received from the province will actually build confidence with those funding agencies and other agencies, so that if we do want to expand the facility to other uses and other needs, like perhaps a skate park or other rec facilities or whatever it might be, then those funding agencies have already we've built trust with them, and it'll make it easier, and it can become a catalyst for future ideas and future expansions. So we just wanted to talk very briefly, or not very briefly, but just talk about the referendum itself. So what's at stake here? To sum it up, we're basically asking you, the public, if you approve of borrowing up to $4 million to complete the capital budget to enable this project to go forward. It's as simple as that. If the public decides to not support the referendum and the referendum doesn't pass, then essentially the project won't move forward. It will be a full rescoping and a regrouping and trying to get to understand why the project, the referendum itself didn't pass, and to better understand what our next steps forward will be. We can't really use that grant funding without the provincial authority and it has to align with those outcomes that we identified earlier. If another alternative that could happen if the referendum were not to go forward is that we could look to the community to see if we can generate the remaining funds through donations and revisit it in that way. So again, I just wanted to say that it's about whether or not we're willing to borrow the money. So thanks, Sophie. Yeah, if you can advance the slide. I think what we'd like to do now is actually hear from a couple of our key panelists from strong community members and hear what they have to say about the project.
Great, thanks very much, Liam. So yeah, we're just going to hear from Sherry, Craig, and Jackie just a minute or two on their thoughts and the work that they've put into this over the years. So let's start with you, Sherry. All right.
I can't find myself, but that's okay. I'm assuming I'm in the frame.
You are.
I have been a musician and a recording artist all my life, and so many of my shows, about a third of them are in community halls and smaller communities. So I'm often dropped in the middle of this wonderful, enthusiastic volunteer base and the pride in their facility, which is something that I've missed being here. So for those 27 years, I've been aware of something that you don't necessarily realize you miss if it's not there, but if it's there, you realize how valuable it is. As an artist and a presenter, we are in a very unique position here on Bowen because there's always a radius clause for artists who play in Vancouver. And those are limited by, how far away the other show is that an artist might want to do. So because by virtue of being an island, we're in that unique position where Bowen Island can be an additional date for an artist and an artist that normally you wouldn't be able to bring here. It's fantastic for the artist and it's a win-win for the community because of course it means you don't have to go in and spend all that money to go into Vancouver. So we haven't up until now had a facility that was sufficiently equipped or in size or in equipment to be able to accommodate those shows. So that's a very exciting aspect, and Bowen is so unique in that regard because of being an island. So that's my spiel.
Thanks, Sherry. Craig, let's hear from you. You'll have to unmute yourself as well.
There. All right. Speaking from the programming perspective, we're pretty excited. We may not be getting a major recreational facility, but we are getting some really good programmable space. The large multi-cultural, multi-purpose room and the smaller one are going to really open up the programming opportunities. We're going to be able to offer a lot more programs. And we have also access to the rooms in the Muni Hall at night, which once again brings in more people. And the nice thing about bringing in the people as it is actually is, you get people coming in, you meet your friends, you meet your neighbors, you have chance meetings. A lot of things can really happen. You get that synergy happening, and who knows, maybe we get a little spark and can start talking about future recreational facilities at a later date. But we're really excited, and I certainly hope that Bowen can pull together here. It would be a big bonus for us to be able to offer all the programs that we'd like to do. So yeah, don't forget to vote.
Thanks, Craig. Jacqueline.
Thanks, Craig and Sherry. Similarly, I mean, I've lived on Bowen Island for about 30 years now. I've raised my daughters here. What I've learned about and know is true about this place is that we all value the sense of community that thrives in our island home. And I truly believe that building a community center will not only enhance and strengthen that sense of community, that sense of connectedness and belonging, the social fabric that Liam referenced. We need a dedicated programming space for arts and recreation, absolutely. But we also need a physical location where we can bump into each other and create those shared experiences. You know, perhaps it will be while enjoying a harvest dinner featuring delicious local food, or at a riveting performance featuring theater that brings us to laughter or tears. Maybe it'll be while we're sweating it out in the fitness studio or while we're picking up our children from play care. In sharing these experiences, we build community. We begin to share stories, we listen to one another. I realize that building a community center won't suddenly result in peace and harmony on Bowen Island, but it could mean that when those who have spent time in the same space, when the next time they meet, they'll recognize each other, even if slightly. They become part of each other's memory. They will have stood on common ground. We will have an increased capacity to listen, perhaps even an attitude of empathy and respect, thanks to the knowledge that we shared something in common and possibly something meaningful to us both. This is where we may arrive if we build a place to hold us and bring us together. And if we can achieve that, who knows what might be in store for our little island community on the West Coast.
Thanks so much, Jacqueline. Thank you, guys. That concludes the presentation part of our open house. So what we'd like to do now is just open for a question and answer session. And what I'd like to invite you to do is we'll follow these guidelines. First, if you would like to ask a question, you can raise your virtual hand, as Kate Coffey has already done. You can do that by clicking on the participants tab, and it'll give you an option to raise your hand. I'll call on you and unmute you. Or ask you to unmute yourself. There are also questions that have been posted in the chat box. I'm going to allow like one question per person until we've gone through the list, just to allow for different voices to come in. So I see that Anita and Michael, you've got a number of questions to ask. We might not be able to get to all of those, but I'd like to just give everybody a chance to ask a question and might come back to you. So I'm going to open up the questions with a question that Anita put to us early in the chat. Anita, do you want to, I'll open your microphone, and would you like to ask, or you can unmute yourself and you can ask one of your questions.
There we go. Thanks. I was curious whether the grant would actually disappear if the Muni segment of the building is removed and the arts and rec space is increased. Because what I'm hearing from folks is that the grant is really predicated on arts and rec. And that does seem to be the most contentious piece. So
I'm happy to field that question.
Great, go ahead.
Yeah, great question, Anita. And so it is true that the funding is based on the recreation, community, and arts component of the project. The federal and provincial government do not fund municipal halls. It's not as simple as just pulling the municipal hall out and adding in more space. I do want to be clear, like, while that is an option, there are significant costs associated with that, because there are components of the municipal hall, the meeting space rooms that I identified earlier, that are actually factored into that multi-use aspect of the project. And so it would be a fairly significant redesign to actually use that space in a different way. Office spaces are actually quite cheap in a design and construction environment. That large multi-use space, the performing arts space, those, and even the larger community spaces, those are more complicated, more expensive components. So if we wanted to repurpose the community hall, it's not to say we can't do it, and you're right about the funding. It's just that it will cost both time and money to do it. I just want to be clear about that.
Great, thank you, Liam. I'm going to go to Jess. You've typed a question in the chat box. Jess, do you want to open your mic and go ahead and ask the question? Jess, are you there? Jess's question was, she was wondering about, she or he, I'm not sure, was wondering about where they can find a copy of the grant application that was submitted. Liam, do you know if that's online somewhere?
It's not a publicly available document. It's not that we don't want to share it. I personally would have to review it to see if there's anything that we wouldn't want to trip up a tendering process with. So we don't want to inadvertently let the tendering market know of anything that would have been in there that might be sensitive or might trip up our own hand when we go to market if we're successful with the referendum. So Jess, let me look into that, and maybe you want to email me directly here at the BIM offices, and I can get back to you on
Great.
that.
Thanks very much. Michael Nankin, you had a number of questions. Is there a way you could kind of sum them up into one? Maybe it's questions for Drew about the use of space.
Well, they're sort of different elements of the performing arts space. So should I just pick one?
Yeah, just pick one. And Drew can also look at them as well as you're going.
Well, I guess it's is it set up for any kind of live performance? Is there a load in for scenery? Is there storage for scenery and props? Is there a way to put on a play there?
Great.
Okay, so Michael, yeah, absolutely, there is a way to put on a play there. There would have to be, depending on how long the play is going to run and what the scenery looks like, there would potentially have to be some kind of discussions and negotiation with the other programs that use the space to see if they can operate with, let's say, stage sets in place over time. But there isn't per se a lot of storage for that kind of thing. We had a meeting in the midst of design with the number of members from the performing arts community on the island. And there were concerns about this, concerns also about like where sets can be made. And there is this storage space in the basement. It will be some sense of, again, negotiation to determine how much of that might be given over to the arts community. But this is absolutely a performance space. Richard Schick was working with us in the design of the space. The draperies are they're intended to be stowed away when not in use, but they can be put out to create a full stage space. It's a bit of a black box, obviously, but that's part of the intention. There's a full lighting grid. It will have all of the necessary amenities. There are house lights which dim to zero, and yeah, sound system and so on.
Great. Thanks so much. We've got Kate Coffey had her virtual hand up. Kate, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, thank you. This is a question for Liam. How long will we have to pay the $50 on the property tax for the capital portion? Is it split between $50 and $47, or do I have that the other way around?
No, you're right. Yeah, $50 is the capital portion, and I'm hopeful it'll be less, but again, we're conservative in our forecasts, and it would be a 30-year debenture borrow. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I have a suggestion on the swimming pool thing, on how you go about that. I think people hear that it's expensive to build, so the capital costs are expensive, and then the operating costs, the ongoing costs. Would it be possible to maybe just carve out some additional property tax, by property tax, both in terms of capital and operating, how much additional cost on average a swimming pool cost? Because I've been 21 years on the island or whatever, and this has, it constantly comes up, and we deal with it, we think, and then the question comes back up again over and over. So I think if people don't fully appreciate how much,
right.
So it would be good to size that.
Right. Well, it's a good question. I mean, and there's a myriad of different types of pools, right? From an outdoor pool, a saltwater pool, to like an indoor pool, and like a play pool, and like an Olympic-sized swimming pool. What are we talking about pools? So, but generally what I've seen in my experience in working with all 189 local governments across the province for the last 15 years is like the cheapest pools that we've ever done in the $10 million magnitude. And those are really small, very bare bones, not much, no bells and whistles. If you want to have a little more of a community style pool that actually has like a 15-meter length or greater for a lap pool and some kid-friendly stuff, then you're getting into the $20 million mark. And that's the capital cost. And operating pools can be upwards of $1 million a year, depending on the facility itself. Now, obviously, the Tunstall Bay pool is a totally different story. That's not in the same magnitude of pools that I'm used to dealing with.
Great, thanks so much, Liam. And Sophie's posted a link in the chat box for more information on pools. There's been some look at the sort of back of the napkin financing. I guess that's the same kind of figures you were talking about there, Liam. So you can go to ourislandplace.com/swimming pool and find some more information on that. Glenn, you had a virtual hand up raised in the chat box. Do you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Chris. I'd like to first thank Liam for his clarification on a really important point that was sort of confusing me for a while. And that's that if the referendum doesn't pass, that my understanding is we would not automatically lose all the grant funding. Instead, we just need to reassess the project, go back to the province with an updated proposal. And I think that's a very important degree of flexibility that wasn't really made very clear at all during a lot of the discussions on this. My question is, why has the municipality sort of not made this very clear given that confusion? We see it pop up a lot on the Facebook chats and things like that.
Thanks, Glenn.
Hi, Glenn. Thanks for the question. It's a good question. And I think it's because, well, and I don't know that we don't have a super strong presence on social media, so I think questions can start to unravel or expand quite quickly. But the general sense is that when a referendum does not pass for a project that has received funding, it gets the funders quite concerned, and it introduces a level of risk that they're not very comfortable with. And so it will require a fair bit of convincing on our part to the province and the federal government that no, we've got this. We can turn this around. We can gain the electors' support for this. And so it's not a carte blanche. You lose the funding, game over, go away, try again another day. But it does mean you've got to put a very concerted effort in to rebuild that trust of those funders. And so a lot of communities will actually try to secure public support in advance, but it's a bit of a chicken and egg question, which is the best way to go. It's neither here nor there. So if the referendum doesn't pass and we are into a rescoping exercise, it's going to cost a lot of money and it's going to take quite a bit of time. And time, I hate to say it, is money. And I just want to make this one point clear from my experience and understanding of the infrastructure construction market. That we're about to see the market for public infrastructure never really slowed down during the COVID crisis. Like the housing market took a bit of a slowdown, but is coming back up. The large infrastructure market has not slowed because of their significant federal and provincial dollars in the market. And when our project was announced, it was announced alongside 96 other similar projects. And all of those projects are going to be vying for the construction market to secure tenders and to secure contracts. And so I'm very cognizant of that. And if we can get the support of the electorate, I want to get to market quickly to try to ensure that we secure that bid quickly. Now, if the electorate thinks that this is worthy of pausing, then that's perfect. That's the public's perspective. And then we'll have to take that pause. But that will cost us time and money. So I just wanted to share that.
Great, thanks so much. Steve, you have a question about younger people. You can unmute yourself, Steve. You're muted. And maybe I'll ask the question for Steve. He's asking, are you there, Steve?
It's actually my question. Kathy?
Hi, Kathy.
On the same computer. Yeah. I'm just wondering what provisions have been made for young people, teens and younger, for programs for them for after school, that type of thing. I was involved with Joyce Ganong in designing the first Vital Conversations, and that came out as a big priority. Some place for teens to get together and go to after school while their parents are still working.
Thanks, Kathy. Go. Anybody want to address that question?
I'm happy to address it, and I would love Jackie's input too, because she's got a lot more history and context on the development of this project than I do. But my understanding is that we will continue to lease the teen center space from the children, Bowen Islands Children's Center, and that we don't have a dedicated teen center space in this facility. But one of the beauties of locating this facility next to the school is that it will also help with young teens. And so there can be programming that's made available in this new facility that children can, or whether they're young children or teens, can participate in. And so there is that synergy of having a space right next to the school where where children and young teens can move back and forth. So we'll maintain the teen center and its critical program. I'm learning more about it all the time. And maybe there's an opportunity to do teen programming in the space, but that's something that'll have to be worked out through the programming collective agreements. And Jackie, can you chime in if you have anything to add?
Sure, absolutely. Great question. Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, the programming that goes on right now for teens, again, as Liam mentioned, is largely centered at the teen center, but we have envisioned that the community center is a great gathering place for them. So we've talked about, that will be a good place for them to meet up and connect in terms of doing things possibly off island, but that would be the hub where they would actually come together. And certainly the spaces would be available.
Seem to be losing you there, Jackie.
I can speak to a little bit on that as well. For sure, it's programming for teens is always a problem, even with the best of facilities. But this does give us some opportunities. The multi-purpose room there can be used for teen dances. There'll be programs. It's going to be like drama programs. There will be as much programming as we can do for the teens. What we're looking at, and it's sort of been alluded to before this, but there's certainly no concrete plans in place of this, but a skate park would be something that would be kind of nice to be near the community centers, because it's got facilities. And once you get something along the lines of a skate park, or even the basketball courts over at the Bix there, so you got some sort of the kids hanging around the area, and that's really what teens like, is just a place to go and get and just to meet each other. So we're optimistic that this is going to really help out in getting the teens involved, but it's difficult to say exactly what programs we're going to be using. We'll certainly be trying a lot of different ideas, once things start moving. So yeah, we're optimistic it's going to work out well for them.
Great, thanks. We've got about 20 minutes left, and so I just want to move through some of these questions a little bit faster. There's some great questions coming up in the chat. I'd like to go to Jessica. You had your, you posted a question in the chat a little bit earlier, Jessica Kuzel.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a couple of questions. I'm relatively new on Bowen, so this is quite new to me, all of this. One question that was mentioned, sustainability through the building presentation, and I'm wondering what specifically was meant by that. Was it like sustainable building supplies, like the environmental impact of what's going to be used and how it's going to be built? So can you expand on what's meant by sustainability?
Great, thanks.
Imagine that's for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's a great question. Let's say we have had a number of initiatives as part of the design all the way through. So sustainability, obviously, as you say, means a variety of things. So this building, our target was to try to get somewhere around step 3 in the energy step code. We did energy modeling with our mechanical engineering consultants and developed pretty robust thermal envelope for the walls and roof of the building. So what that does is it takes the load off the mechanical systems and generally is just, that just is generally helpful for the environment and for the building. And there are some other things where we're using, we have, for instance, motion detector lighting in most of the rooms and that kind of thing. So there are a variety of initiatives that have been taken, and they sort of show up in a variety of ways like that. I've heard other questions. It's not a passive house building, and that was never the goal for the building. There are costs associated with that, and so on. So we're feeling very good about this building being. We have had a building permit for some time now under the previous building code, but we suspect that we would have one under the current building code as well.
Great, thanks so much. I'm just going to move on so we can make sure that we can hear from everyone who's got questions at the moment. So I'm going to go to Marissa McGilvery. You have a question about rental costs.
Thanks. The question was answered. I think a link was posted.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Let's hear from Murray Atherton. You had a question. Murray, would you like to unmute your mic?
Yeah, just wondering, I thought one of the major selling points of the Performing Arts Center, I thought I had.
You're good. I can hear you.
Just wondering, I thought one of the major selling points of the Performing Arts Center, I thought I had. Oh, just a sec. I've got, I'm watching it on the TV on the YouTube as well.
I have to do that old talk radio thing, Murray, where it's like, please turn down your radio while you're asking questions. This cuss us back right to the 1980s.
I think I'm okay now. Question: the Performing Arts Center, the selling feature I thought was that the Graham Ritchies of the world would not have to rip down their sets while they're putting on their presentations, and now it sounds like they're going to be battling with all the recreation activities as well. So I can't see it working as well as I had hoped it was going to.
Great. I think Sherry's got an answer.
I'm keen to answer that one. That's always something in a communal space, in a community center, in a performance space that's in a community center. I have played on so many different sets, which are actually quite interesting to perform on somebody's set as a background. So it's quite common, and the intention is definitely to make, well, first of all, the arts have priority in terms of programming, but it's very easy to make the two work together because sets are on one side of the room. So it's certainly not expected that sets are going to have to be taken down every day before rec comes in. It's not that kind of a situation. It's just a matter of communication and coordination.
Great. Thanks very much, Sherry.
Maybe I could perhaps just add one more note to that, Chris. This is a really large space, and it's quite possible to imagine that 25 to 30% of that space could be dedicated to a fixed set, which is going to stay for a number of weeks for production. And the balance of the space is still large enough to deliver a lot of the programs that are being considered. So it's not a case of either or at all, I think.
And can I jump in as well? This one. So there is a draft memorandum of agreement that has been drawn up, and it actually gives arts and culture priority programming in that space. So just to be clear, it's all about programming, and with the understanding that yes, there are needs for theater and musical performances that their needs are probably need to be taken into consideration first and foremost, and then of course other programming to ensure that that space is used 24/7 will follow, but definitely it's a matter of programming and looking at those priorities.
Great, thanks guys. Trish Jaquette has a question about construction costs. Trish, do you want to open your mic?
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering, as we know, most of the buildings and everything that are being done all usually go over a budget of something. Is there a plan on how we're going to cover those costs if they do arise? Is it going on to our taxes, or is there extra money stashed away to allow for it?
If there's extra money stashed away, I want to know where it is. But it's a good question, Trish. So there is a $2 million contingency allocation to the budget to try to address cost escalation. And you know as well as most, if not better, that it is a true reality of cost escalation. We're seeing it in the market pretty steadily. So we have estimated cost escalation for the project, as well as attributed a $2 million contingency. And so we'll be trying very hard not to dip into that contingency if we don't have to. My sense is we would have to, because costs generally escalate. If it goes beyond, like let's say we do get a bid that meets our affordability cap, and we end up having to use the full contingency and it starts to go beyond, then we will have to, yes, use general revenue to cover off that additional cost. But it'll likely, depending on the cost escalation itself, it likely wouldn't require additional borrowing. So it wouldn't likely be an increase to a taxation roll for the same amount of time as the borrowing, the $4 million borrowing. So if it was a significant overrun, then we would be having to take that back to council and determine how are we going to address it.
Thank you very much, Liam. We've got room for a couple more questions. This has been really good. If anybody would like to ask a question, please just put your tap that participants button, and it'll give you the option for raising your virtual hand, just so we can see if there's anyone here. And otherwise, is not seeing anybody else. Anita, you had another question you wanted to ask, and then I'll have Jessica. I'll go to Jessica after you. Anita,
Yeah.
a question about?
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
So the building is proposed to be open 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. But of course, the Muni is only open from 8:30 to 4:30. And we're wanting to encourage people to gather there. Is there going to be a building attendant who's going to be available to kind of be on site to allow for that use? And has that been costed in the operating budget?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. The building will open before most Muni staff are there, and it'll close when most Muni staff are gone. And so there will be a facility manager that will be helping manage the facility itself, as well as a clerk that will be available to help operate the facility on site. And then we're trying to minimize the amount of staff that have to be there to operate the facility. So we'll probably allocate some of the responsibilities to our custodial contract that'll be required as well. So there's no reason why the custodians for the site that are doing janitorial services couldn't lock up at the end of the evening. That happens in a lot of community centers, And those costs have been factored into the business plan, into the operating costs.
And Liam, would they also deal with it if there was a problem? Like a conflict between uses or something like that?
Well, that would be, I wouldn't expect that for the custodial worker to be able to deal with that, but the project or the facility manager and the facility clerk, yes, that's their role, that's their goal. And so if they're, let's say it was after hours, it's 9 o'clock and there's some sort of conflict over use, you know, there will be a contact number that can be used if it's not resolvable. And so it's not like it can't, you know, it can't be addressed.
Good. Thanks, Liam. Jessica's got her hand up as well, and I'd like to give you another question.
Hi, I have a few, but I'll keep it quick.
We're getting close to the end of time, so maybe pick the most important.
Okay. Well, I was wondering, how many new jobs will this provide in the programming? Is there projection of that? And also, is there transparency in regard to the current costs of rental for the municipal offices and the cost of the municipal offices in the new plan and why this makes sense? I think that might alleviate some of the pushback from the community. And then also, what about public art within the building budget? Something about 1% of all buildings are supposed to be allocated to public art, or I'm not sure where I heard that, but yeah.
Great.
Good questions, Jessica. I'll try to address some of them, but welcome the others to come in on it too. So the cost to rent our current facilities is very similar to the cost of borrowing. So the cost to construct the municipal portion is very, very close to what we're currently paying for rent in our current hall. So it is, that's why we call it tax neutral. And tax neutral is a funny term because you are paying taxes for the rent. So it's, but anyway, it is a nice equal, almost like a, instead of paying rent, we're paying a mortgage, so to speak. So that's a good thing. And then the question about public art, yeah, we want to incorporate as much public art as we can. You know, we would like to see local Bowen Island public art be utilized in the facility, around the facility. And there is gallery space that is there to be used and showcased local, and not just local too, it could be off island as well, but the priority will be for local art to be showcased. And there, you had a third question.
Yeah, it was about the number of jobs that are.
Oh, right. So there's a job estimator on like construction projects and 10.2 jobs per million. So really, it depending on how you want to slice it, the project itself could be generating a significant number of jobs, 20 odd jobs. Those won't all be on island jobs for the construction component. And then it will result in 1.5 new jobs to run the facility. But really the bulk of the existing staff will actually be consolidated onto site. So it's 1.5 new jobs ongoing and about 20 plus jobs for, if not more, for the actual construction.
Great, thanks very much. So that's going to bring us to the end of our question and answer period. Sophie's posted up thread in the chat, and maybe I'll get her to post it again, an email address where you can address any further questions to folks, or you can reach out to these guys as well directly at the Muni office if you've got any further questions. We're just going to let you know a little bit of information about the next open houses that are coming up and some of the referendum stuff. So I'll hand it back to Liam, and you can take us through this. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Liam.
Thank you.
Try one more time.
What's going on? Okay. That work?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So yes, okay. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight and all of the great questions, and keep them coming, and encourage everybody to get out and vote. It's our civic duty to do this. So please encourage your friends and family to get out and vote. There are different ways to vote. We'll talk about that in a minute, but there are other open houses too for more engagement. We're going to have a community center reimagined initiative that is being hosted by the Hearth down in the gallery by the ferry there next Wednesday night. It sounds like it's going to be a fantastic event, so please don't hesitate to show up. And then following that, on Saturday the 29th, there'll be an outdoor info booth session set up at the Bix Community School. And both of these have COVID safety plans in place. And please bring your mask and please bring your friends, and encourage people to show up. So again, a bit to finish off on the referendum information, you must be 18 years of age or older when you register to vote. And you must be a Canadian citizen, and you have to have been a resident of BC for at least 6 months before you can be registered to vote. And you have to either live or own property on Bowen for at least 30 days before you're able to vote. So thankfully, I just sneak in there by 30, 40 more days or so. And you must not be disqualified under the Local Government Act or any other enactment or bylaw to vote in a local election. So when and where can you vote? There's mail-in voting opportunities for anybody that cannot make the voting days. And so please don't hesitate to request that. There's an advanced voting day. Oh, I'm sorry, I got them mixed up. Sorry about that, Sophie. There's the advanced voting day on Wednesday, September 2nd at the Municipal Hall. We have a very good COVID safety plan in place. So please don't hesitate to come in and vote. And we have the general voting day on September 12th at the Bix Community School in the gymnasium. And again, a very, very comprehensive COVID safety plan in place for that. And as I mentioned, we do have the mail-in ballot possibility for those who cannot attend. So no reason to not vote. If you're eligible to vote, please vote.
So just to clarify, does that mean if I have a criminal record, I can't vote?
I don't think that's what that means.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you'll be okay, Sherry. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone coming out, spending your evenings with us.
Thanks. So let's turn it back over to Gary, and just as a way of capping our evening together. Thanks so much.
On here. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining in this virtual open house. Hopefully you'll pass the word around about the other events that are going to happen, and we'd love to see you all there. It's a very exciting time for us. Obviously, we've been at this a really long time, and we're just hoping for the community to come and back us up on this. I think it's going to be an absolutely incredible facility. It's a start. I'd like to see, to Craig's point there, I'd like to see a skate park there for the teen group and that sort of thing. We're trying to get something for everybody in that. So it's going to be a bit of a process, but we have to start somewhere. Thank you very much for joining. And thank you for all the presenters, the team.
Great, thank you very much. So that brings us to a close for the evening. Thanks for coming out to the virtual open house. The recording will be up on YouTube and available to watch, so you can share it with your friends and neighbors. And the slide deck also is available, as are the materials at ourislandplace.com. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a great evening, and make sure to bring things off your deck. It's going to rain tonight.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Liam. Great job.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Jerry. Thank you.
I'm just going to stop our YouTube stream here. Why can't I stop?